I was born on the res, raised on it, and for the most part, expected to die on it. Not a bad thing necessarily, it's just how it is. My family's been rooted deep in northern Arizona for generations now, way before maps, fences, or pavement. We're pretty spread out now though, some still around Chinle, others scattered across the dry grid of towns along Route 191, some even up near Shiprock. I made a run for it in my 20s, did a couple of years down in Phoenix trying to make something of myself, trying to do that whole adult life thing, apartment, job, night school, and I think it lasted about as long as a disposable lighter. I burned through my savings, couldn't keep my grades up, and the cost of living dragged me under like a sinkhole. I thought I was gonna be somebody. It turns out I was just another idiot without a plan. So I ended up packing up what little I had left and came crawling back north, feeling like a loser with sunburnt pride. I landed back at home pissed at everything. Myself, the res, the heat, the empty roads, that damn dirt that gets in your teeth when the wind kicks up. There's this weird kind of silence out here that amplifies your own thoughts. You sit long enough outside, you just watch the dust swirl and the dogs bark in the distance, and even your own voice starts echoing back at you, louder and nastier. I spent whole days doing absolutely nothing, drinking warm beer and fighting off that voice in my head that would continuously tell me that I blew it, that I'd be here forever, rotting under the same sun that cooked my grandfather's bones into the land. There aren't many jobs here. There's hardly anything really. Just stretches of sand-colored earth broken up by crumbling trailers, rusted trucks, and livestock that wander right into the road. I worked construction here and there. I would also help my cousin run his landscaping scam for a few months, but nothing actually stuck. It was just easier to drink, and most of the guys my age were doing the same thing. We partied until morning and wake up around noon, then piece together what happened the night before, and then do it all again by sunset. It was a rhythm, and even though it felt awful, it was predictable. And there's comfort in knowing what tomorrow's gonna look like, even if tomorrow is a train wreck. That's where I was now, mad at myself and mad at everybody else, and just hanging out with the same people that I grew up with, all pretending we weren't just circling the same drain. Tina was part of that world, and we had history. Good times, sure, but most of them were bad. She was sharp-tongued and hot-tempered, and gorgeous enough to make you ignore both of those things. We were together and apart so often that it stopped meaning really anything. She was the type of girl who would slap you across the face and then kiss you in the same breath. And I was dumb enough to take it. That's what made the next part of my life so damn hard to explain, because somewhere in the middle of all that toxic noise, something happened that I can't even say out loud without my throat going dry. Something, still to this day, I hardly have words for. Things got worse between Tina before they got better, and then they just got worse again. We'd fight in the parking lot of gas stations, scream at each other outside people's trailers, then crawl back into each other's beds like nothing had ever happened. It was pathetic, honestly. She called me a burnout, and I called her every name I could think of. I drank far too much, and she would flirt with guys right in front of me. Still, we kept orbiting each other like two dumb comets, waiting to collide. I started going harder, more drinks, more nights, less memories. There was a point where I couldn't remember full stretches of my days. I wrecked my car one night trying to dodge a coyote and ended up slamming into a guardrail just outside of Lukuchkai. Busted front end and had to hitchhike home. Honestly, that should have been a wake-up call, but instead, I used it as another excuse to stay closer to town and drink even more. The parties never stopped. Someone was always having one, and if they weren't, I'd just make one happen myself. I honestly thought I was the life of the party, but really, people were just tolerating me, and that became obvious very fast. After a few blow-ups, some more fights, and broken furniture, and then a bad night where I almost hit a guy with a bottle, I started noticing fewer and fewer invitations. Group chats would go silent when I asked what was going on. Friends would stop swinging by my place. Tina told me I needed help, said I was dead behind the eyes, and she cried when she said it, and I laughed in her face. I thought I was being tough. All I was empty, hollow. One night, I heard about this party happening outside of town. Some guy I only half knew was throwing it at his place near this abandoned quarry. It was past the last streetlight before the desert takes over. Of course, I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. I walked there with the half-full bottle of tequila tucked into my coat. By the time I got there, I was already half buzzed and full of heat. I could hear the music before I even reached the driveway. Cheap speakers blasting out bass like a heartbeat. The house was packed. People on the porch in the yard smoking, laughing, music bumping off the crumbling walls. The minute I stepped into the yard, I felt it, that tension, the way heads turned immediately toward me. No one would meet my eye for very long. Tina was there, of course, sitting on the tailgate of some guy's truck, beer in hand, legs crossed like she didn't have a care in the world. When she saw me, her face dropped. She shook her head and whispered something to the guy next to her and stood up. When I got closer, she walked right up and pushed her finger into my chest. "The hell are you doing here?" she said. "Nobody wants you here." I looked around smirking like I wasn't hurt. "It's a free res, isn't it?" She didn't flinch. "Just leave. Don't make this any worse than it already is." That lit the fuse though. I started shouting, calling her fake, calling everybody cowards. People start gathering around like buzzards. A couple old friends stepped in and tried to calm me down, but I shoved one of them. And that's when it turned. I got clocked in the mouth. Don't even know who did it. And then I was on the ground, people yelling and somebody kicking me in the ribs. Tina was screaming for everybody to back off, and when they did, she leaned down and said something I still hear in my sleep. "You're gonna die out here, and nobody is gonna miss you." And just like that, she walked away. I staggered up and spit blood into the dirt and stumbled off. Nobody stopping me. Nobody cared. I walked half blindly, half drunk and vibrating with rage. I don't even know where I was going, just away from it all. Away from the music, the lights, the people who now hated me. I cut through a small neighborhood that was tucked behind a line of twisted mesquite trees. Houses mostly dark, maybe with one porch light glowing yellow, like a dying bug zapper. It was quiet outside, dead quiet. I turned down a lane that was lined with trash bins, those big green dumpsters the tribe rolls out for house pickups. The first one on the left rattled just a little, and I stopped and squinted at it. I figured it was probably an animal inside, so I stepped closer, hand out and ready to lift the lid. Then another one rattled on the opposite side, further down the lane, and another and another. The sound was like something alive trying to break out, scratching and pounding from the inside. I froze. 12 dumpsters on either side of the narrow gravel path, and every single one started to shake. I backed up a few steps and then another, and just as I opened up my mouth to curse, they all jumped. Every single one. I swear to God they lifted off the ground, 8 feet, maybe more, then slammed back down like they'd been dropped by a crane. The sound was like a dozen car crashes all at once. I screamed. My ears rang and dust filled the air. The world seemed to stand still for a long second, then went dead again. No wind, no barking dogs, nothing. I wanted to run, but I didn't, and I don't know why. I just walked forward, right down the middle of that haunted corridor. My shoes crunched in the gravel. As I passed each dumpster, the lids would open, slow and creak. I looked inside each one, bracing myself to see something horrific, but they were all empty, clean even, no trash or even smells. When I reached the end of the lane, I stopped and my hands were shaking. I couldn't breathe right, and that's when I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, cousin." The voice wasn't familiar and it wasn't right. It was deep and wide, like it came from the inside of the land itself. I turned around. There was someone or something standing at the far end of the road, tall and dark, no features, just this thick silhouette, like it absorbed every single bit of light around it. I didn't even think, I just turned to run, but something hit me, hard, right behind my ear. It was like a massive palm, flat and fast. It slapped the side of my head so hard my vision went white. I fell forward and stumbled into a ditch beside the road. landed hard on the concrete culvert. My head bounced off the edge and then everything went black. I didn't even have time to scream. When I came to, the sun was up, blinding me. That kind of Arizona morning that turns your mouth into sandpaper and makes your eyes sting before you even open them. I was on my back in the ditch, half covered in dust and sticky with blood. My head was throbbing like I'd been hit with a brick. My throat was dry enough to scrape. Everything hurt. I blinked hard and sat up slowly and immediately regretted that. That culvert that I was in was crusted with old beer cans, plastic wrappers, and broken glass. Something had crawled over me during the night. There were tracks, maybe a coyote or maybe something worse. Above me, leaning over the edge of the ditch, were two guys that I recognized, locals. One of them a heavy-set dude with a ponytail and a laugh that sounded like a diesel engine, and he shouted down at me. "Damn, we thought you were a dead man. We were about to call the fire department to scrape you out of there." The other one laughed too, holding up a phone like he'd been recording me. "You've been laying there all night? Pissed yourself, bro." I tried to stand, but my legs wobbled and then gave out. The pain in my head was unreal, sharp and blinding, like something inside had been knocked loose. I didn't even say anything or respond. I couldn't. Just nodded and let them help pull me out, brushing off dirt and trying not to puke. They just continued laughing, telling me I must have been super wasted to end up like that, and I just let them think that was what it was. It was a lot easier. Easier than saying what really happened. Easier than asking if they saw the thing in the road. Because here's the thing, I remember all of it. The dumpsters, the voice, the slap, the thing standing in the dark like it was waiting for me to reach the end of the path. I remember the sound of my head when it hit that concrete, like a dropped melon. I remember feeling watched, not by people, but by something older, meaner, something that did not belong in this world but did anyway. I didn't end up telling anybody, not my family, not Tina, not the people laughing at me. I didn't ask if they saw anything strange that night either. I don't think I wanted the confirmation. I don't want to know that it was real. Instead, I just got quiet and took a long, hard look at myself. I stopped drinking too. Not overnight, but eventually. Started working odd jobs and saved up some cash. Got a place in a bigger town a few hours west. Nothing fancy, but clean. I don't go back to the parties. I don't talk to Tina, and I haven't walked down that lane since. Hell, I won't even drive near it. Some nights, when I'm lying in bed and I can't sleep, I think about that voice. "Hey, cousin." And I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't turned around, if I just kept walking. But mostly, I try not to think about it. That night stays locked up tight inside of me, like those dumpsters, lid down, nothing to see, empty. That's my story. I used to hate going to the res, not because of my cousins. I liked them fine, but because it was just so boring out there. The air was dry and hot at the same time, the kind of heat that makes your skin feel like it was shrinking onto your bones. The landscape didn't help either. It all looked like the same thing. Dusty dirt, brown scrub brushes, some of them with thorns, and huge empty skies that never seemed to end. No grass, no water, not even clouds on most days, just endless heat and endless quiet. My mom and dad would take us out there maybe twice a year, usually in the summer to visit my aunt, uncle, and their kids. They lived in this long, low house that smelled like sage and old wood. The place had this swamp cooler that barely worked, and the only relief we got was from standing in front of the fan in the living room or pressing our faces to the inside of the fridge when nobody was looking. They had one TV with basic channels and one of those chunky DVD players that skipped if you so much as bumped the shelf that sat next to it. There wasn't a whole lot to do. The town that was nearby did have a public pool, but it was usually packed and far too murky to enjoy. And their small town store they called a mercantile had a few arcade machines that was shoved inside a corner. But most of the time we didn't really go anywhere. My cousins Rona, Candy, and little Rico mostly stayed inside and just talked and laid around, or dared one another to do dumb stuff. Sometimes we'd walk out to the fence behind the house and just stare off into the hills, pretending we could see monsters or shadows moving out on the rocks. But it was usually just cows or heat shimmers. The trip that I'm thinking of, the one that I'm gonna tell you about, was one of the hottest that we ever had. There's some kind of heat wave that was going on and nobody was even allowed to play outside during the day. My uncle said we'd fry like eggs. So we stayed in, all 5 of us crammed in the kids' room with the curtains closed and the old box fan buzzing. Rona and Candy would flip through the magazines or gossip about people at their school. Rico mostly played on this handheld or annoyed us. I tried to read, but the air was thick and heavy and it just made it so hard to concentrate. We only would go outside after the sun went down, and even then, it was still way too hot to do much. It made us cranky. At night, we'd pile into the kids' bedroom and try to make one another laugh or tell gross stories, play old board games with missing pieces. It was very boring and lonely, even with everybody right there. And then, on one of those sticky nights, something happened that I don't truly fully understand. Something in that house. Something in the closet. We were in the kids' room laying on the floor and slumped against the walls and talking about nothing really. Rona was braiding Candy's hair. Rico was eating those stale tortilla chips that we had around. And I was laying on my stomach flipping through this old Goosebumps book that I'd already read 10 times, at least. The fan made it hard to hear each other unless we raised our voices, and the TV was playing a rerun of some kind of game show that nobody was really paying attention to. I got bored and said, "We should play something, guys." "Like what?" Rona asked without looking up. "I don't know, a board game or something." The only response I got was a few groans, but nobody said no. We really didn't have many options, and it beat sitting around sweating in silence. Candy said that all the board games were inside the closet, the one at the corner of the room with the crooked door and the little metal handle that always pinched your fingers if you weren't careful enough. The closet also had this smell coming from it, like dust and old carpet and something else, something far too sour. "They're stacked up in there," Candy said. "You can go pick one." I rolled onto my feet and made my way across the room. The carpet was worn out, and I had to step over a few toys in this old laundry basket that hadn't been used in forever. The closet door was halfway open, just enough that I could see a sliver of darkness inside. I don't know why, but something about that space always made me feel super uneasy. Like the shadows in there weren't the same kinds of the ones in the rest of the room. It just felt way darker. I reached for the handle, getting ready to pull the door all the way open, when it rattled. Just once, like somebody inside had leaned on it from the other side. I froze and everybody stopped talking. Then came a voice. It spilled out of the closet like leaking air from a tire, low and wheezy, and speaking a language I didn't understand. It didn't sound angry or happy, it just was, like a conversation already in progress, like I walked in on somebody talking and now they knew I was listening. It sounded like an old man, at least that's what I remember most, the weight in his voice, like he'd been around a long time. My stomach turned cold and I backed away fast, nearly tripping over a toy truck, and scrambled back to where everybody else was sitting. "What was that?" I asked. Rona and Candy looked at each other, and Rico stopped chewing. None of them looked surprised, just kind of uncomfortable. "It's been doing that for a while," Rona said. "What do you mean?" "The closet," Candy added. "Sometimes when we go get something, we hear it. A man talking always sounds the same, old and native, like our grandpa or something, but not. He never comes out or anything, just talks." My mouth felt dry. "Why didn't you tell anybody?" Rona just shrugged. We told our mom about it, but she didn't really listen. That didn't make me feel any better. I glanced over at the closet again, still cracked open, dark as ever. I tried to act like I was cool with it, but my hands were sweaty now, and my throat was tight. Have you ever tried talking to it? I asked. No way, Rico said. He might get mad. I just sat there for a minute, chewing on the inside of my cheek, curiosity buzzing under my skin. I've always been like that. If someone says not to touch something, it's like that little voice in my head starts screaming, touch it, touch it, touch it. I don't know if it's stupid or just stubbornness, but I couldn't stop thinking about that voice. What if it's not bad? I asked. Then Candy gave me this look. You think ghosts are good? I don't know, maybe it's stuck or something. Maybe it needs help. Maybe it wants your soul, Rico muttered. I rolled my eyes even though I was still pretty scared. I got up again and walked toward the closet. This time, everybody got quiet. I reached out with both hands, gripping the edge of the door, and tried to steel myself. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I hesitated for just a second, then yanked the door all the way open. It exploded. Not a way a bomb goes off or anything, but the whole door slammed back against the wall, like somebody on the other side kicked it with both feet. That bang shook the whole room. Dust flew out in a puff and something moaned. Not a voice and not the same old man from before, but a sound like wind twisting through a cave. I screamed and then everybody screamed. Rico dropped that chip bag and bolted. Candy tripped over the toy truck and hit the ground, and then scrambled back up. We ran like our feet were on fire, tearing down that hallway, bare feet yelling for our parents. All the adults were in the kitchen watching TV and nearly dropped everything when we stormed inside. My mom grabbed my arm and asked if we were hurt. My dad stood up super fast and pissed, like we all broken something. But it was my aunt and uncle who really reacted. My father's face changed the second we told him what happened. My aunt made us all sit down and then started talking in a low voice, way too fast for me to catch it all. She pulled out a little bag from the top of the fridge, one that I'd seen her use before when she burned sage, and told us to stay out of the kids' room. That whole night they didn't sleep. My aunt walked through the house with a smoking bundle in her hand, waving it through the air and whispering things under her breath. My uncle marked stuff on the walls with ash and spit on the floor at the door of the closet. Every time there was a creak or pop from inside that room, I saw their faces tighten. I heard the voice again, just once, right before sunrise. It was muffled and distant, but very real. This time, it almost sounded like it was laughing. By the time the sun had come up, none of us had slept. The kids' room stayed shut all night long, and my uncle had shoved a heavy chair in front of the closet door, even though it didn't seem like it would do anything. Whatever had been in there was not afraid of hinges or wood or nails, but I guess it made the adults feel better, so we just left it. My mom and dad were acting like it wasn't a big deal, but I could tell they were shaken up. My dad just kept rubbing his forehead like he had a headache, and my mom would not let go of my hand that whole morning. They tried to laugh it off, saying we were just worked up and maybe had a weird dream or the heat got to us. But my aunt and uncle never laughed, not once, didn't even crack a smile. Around mid-morning, my dad pulled my mom aside, and after a quiet, sharp conversation, they decided that we were gonna head home early. Just cut the trip short and give everybody some time to cool off. At least that's how my dad would put it. I didn't argue. I wanted out of that house so badly that my stomach ached. When I packed my bag, I wouldn't even walk past the kids' room. I had this feeling deep down like something was waiting for me to peek in again. Like the second I looked, it would be there, just standing and grinning at me. I hugged my cousins goodbye. Rona and Candy were really quiet, and Rico wouldn't even come near me. He just waved from the couch like I was someone leaving for war. My aunt hugged me tight and said something in a language that I didn't understand, and slipped this little pouch of dried herbs into my backpack without saying anything else. She kissed my forehead, and my uncle nodded once, dead serious, didn't say a word. We drove out of there with the windows down, and I didn't look back. I never ended up going back to the res after that, not even once. Those trips stopped for reasons I was never told about, and I never pushed back for them to start again. My mom still talks to my aunt every now and again, but I've never asked about the closet, never asked if that voice came back. And honestly, I don't think I really want to know. To this day, I still have that little pouch that my aunt gave me. It sits in a drawer next to my bed. I don't open it, I don't touch it, but I keep it close, just in case that voice ever finds a way to follow me home. I've driven every kind of road this country's got. Urban interstates lit up like Christmas, 2-lane back roads where you don't see another pair of headlights for hours and hours, mountain passes that'll kill you if you blink at the wrong time. But nothing's ever put that kind of chill in my spine like driving through reservation land at night. I've done it far more times than I can count, some of them being long hauls cut right through Native American territory, especially in the Southwest. Places where the land is open and flat for miles and miles, dotted with trailers, abandoned gas stations, and flickering porch lights you swear weren't there the last time you looked. There's just something about it, something off. Maybe it is the isolation, maybe it's the history that you can feel pressing in and around you, but more than one time, I've caught a figure walking the shoulder of the highway at 2 a.m, wearing rags, barefoot and going nowhere. Not hitchhiking, not flagging anybody down, just walking, always walking. They never look at you when your headlights hit them, and when you check your mirror, they're gone. I'd tell myself that they were drifters or locals headed somewhere just out of sight, but that explanation will only work if you're trying real hard to sleep at night. Most of the time, I would just keep the pedal down and the cab locked, eyes on the road, pretending I didn't just see something super weird. On a night a few years back, there was something that made me think twice about ever taking that route through reservation land ever again. I literally almost called my dispatcher the next morning to ask if we could blacklist that entire area. But, of course, I didn't want to sound too crazy. You spend too much time out there alone, you start to wonder if maybe the land itself doesn't want you crossing through. Maybe there are things watching and waiting. I don't know what I saw, and I really don't care to figure it out. Super late, I remember that much. One of these hauls that would stretch from the edge of Utah across to New Mexico and then into Arizona. I think I had 2 hours left on the books before I needed to find a stop and bed down in the sleeper. The highway was empty, clean black asphalt with just enough curves to keep you from nodding off. No towns for a while, no other trucks either. I was cruising pretty steady, sipping at lukewarm coffee and half listening to talk radio crackling through the static. Then from out of nowhere, something darted out of the bush on the left side of the road. At first, I thought it was a deer, big and fast, but when I hit the lane, I saw that it wasn't any kind of animal that I'd ever seen before. It was black, really black, with fur that looked almost patchy, like something deceased. It was on 4 legs, but it moved wrong. And worst of all, it kept pace with me. For a few seconds, it was right there in my lights, and then it vanished. Then it came back, and I knew that I wasn't driving alone anymore. I hit the brakes without even thinking, not slamming on them, just enough to slow things down a bit. I didn't want to kill the thing, whatever it was, but I also didn't want to slam into something at 60 and flip my rig in the middle of nowhere. It darted out in front of my high beams again and then vanished into the brush alongside of the road. But I swear I could still feel it, like it was circling my truck. My fingers clenched the wheel and I coasted to a full stop. The engine idled, ticking like it always did when it was hot and coming down from a long stretch. I leaned forward and looked over the hood, scanning the road, then the shoulder, then the empty hills rising off in the dark. Nothing, no movement, just dirt and sagebrush, and the far-off shimmer of heat still hanging in the air, even after sundown. Then something banged against the bottom of the trailer. I jolted so hard I smacked my elbow against the door. It wasn't a subtle sound, but it wasn't like a rock kicking up or the frame settling. It was clearly deliberate. Something hit it with a closed fist. For a few seconds, I just sat there, engine running, lights cutting off through the dark. Nothing but my own breathing. I didn't want to get out. Every instinct within me told me to just keep driving, forget about it, chalk it up to a coyote or debris or some kind of trick of the eyes. Unfortunately though, part of the job is making sure your equipment isn't busted. A busted airline, torn cabling, a dragging chain, any of that can wreck your night or far worse. So I reached over and grabbed my flashlight from the passenger seat footwell, then pulled out the tire iron from behind the seat and opened up the door. The second I stepped out, the heat hit me like a wall, dry and suffocating, with the faintest smell of roadkill. I walked slow at the length of the cab, shining the flashlight underneath it. Nothing. The undercarriage was clean, dry, no animals, no damage. I crouched to check the wheels and the trailer edge, and then the landing gear. Still nothing. And that's when I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me." I stood straight so fast that the blood rushed to my head and spun around. Two people were standing behind the trailer, an older man and a woman, maybe in their 60s, native, dressed simply. He had on a plaid shirt tucked into his faded jeans, and she wore a long skirt and a jacket too heavy for the weather. They were just there. No footsteps, no headlights, no car pulling off to the side of the road, just standing in the dirt like they'd been waiting there for me. "Sorry," the old man said. "We had some trouble with our car. Thank you for stopping." The woman smiled. Her teeth were perfect. It was like somebody had copied a smile from a magazine and then glued it to her face. "We were starting to think that nobody was going to stop," she said. I didn't respond to them right away. My brain was too busy doing the math and coming up short. "Where's your car?" I asked. They both looked behind them, toward the hills, then slowly turned back to me. The man then smiled this time. "It's out that way," he said, "just past the bend." But there was no bend, not behind them. I would have seen it coming. Just flat road and brush and the low curve of the land. The woman then stepped forward, hand out like she wanted to touch my arm. "Would you mind giving us a ride? It's just down the road." Something in my chest twisted, and I took a step back. I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to pick up passengers." Their faces didn't fall. They didn't look disappointed. They just stood there watching. Their eyes were dark, so dark I couldn't even see the whites, and the longer I looked, the more I realized something was really off about the way that they were standing. Too still, almost like they were statues. "You already stopped," the old man said. "You already heard us. It would be wrong to leave us now." I tightened my grip on the flashlight and shined it straight at them. That's when they moved, not away, not toward me, but back. They stepped backward into the brush at the same time. Their movements were perfectly mirrored, like they were tied together. The light caught their faces, and for a split second they weren't faces at all, just pale shapes, wide and stretched, with grins that kept going too far across. The second they broke into the shadows, they dropped low and scurried off like animals, disappearing into the tall grass on either side of the road. I didn't wait. I ran back up into my cab and slammed the door, locking it, and then fired up the engine. I didn't care about the logs or remaining hours, I just wanted to go. I floored it, the truck lurching forward harder than I normally like to push it, my tires kicking up dust behind me. In the mirror, I caught one last look. The two of them were standing in the red wash of my brake lights, right where they'd been before, standing there side by side, watching, still. And behind them, deeper in the dark, something else was moving, something big. It was crouched low to the ground with fur like oil slicked across twisted limbs. It didn't come forward, it didn't charge, it just stood there, or crouched, I guess, behind them. Yellow eyes that blinked once and then disappeared. I didn't let off the pedal for miles. I drove another 75 miles without stopping, running on stale coffee and pure adrenaline. My hands were locked upon that wheel, stiff even from gripping that hard. I didn't look in the mirrors anymore. I just kept my eyes forward, fixed on the road like it was the only real thing left in the world. The radio talk was just static now, so I just shut it off completely. But that silence that remained in the cab was far worse. Sometime past midnight, I found a pullout just off a frontage road behind an old rest stop. No lights, no other rigs, nothing but an old vending machine that was buzzing without lighting up. I didn't care though, I needed to stop, if only to catch my breath and convince myself that I hadn't completely lost my mind. I parked and killed the engine, then climbed into the sleeper. I locked the doors twice. I sat there for a while, flashlight in my lap, just listening. Nothing though. The usual clicks and groans of a cooling engine, and that was all. Night bugs tapping against the window. I lay down with my boots still on. One hand was still on my flashlight. I told myself I'd just close my eyes for a few minutes. Just before sleep took me, something banged against the underside of the truck, and I froze. It was the same spot, and that same sound, loud as hell, hollow. There was a dragging noise that followed, something pulling itself away maybe. A low scrape against metal and then gravel. I didn't move and I didn't breathe. I just stared at the ceiling in the dark, waiting for it to stop, and eventually it did. I stayed like that until the sun came up. When I finally crawled out of the cab, the ground under the trailer was undisturbed. No footprints, no fur, no sign of anything ever being there. I checked the undercarriage again and still saw nothing. Literally like the whole thing never happened. But I know what I heard. I never told my dispatcher about it. I never filed a report. I took the next job and the next, like always. But from then on, whenever I saw a route that crossed into reservation land, especially late at night, I started rerouting myself every single time, even if it meant longer drives and less pay. Call it superstition, call it paranoia, call it whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. All I know is something was out there that night. Something that doesn't show up on a map or register on a way station. Something that moves way too fast and hides far too well, and talks just like you and me. That is, until it doesn't.